Hi, I'm Sharon Landon, and welcome to Old Asian Lady. Today, my guest is Jaime Chan. He is a third-generation Chinese Panamanian, currently based half in Taiwan and half in Panama. He is the co-founder and CTO of the company behind PicCollage. It's an easy-to-use photo app which became one of the top 10 photo video apps worldwide. Today, the app has been downloaded over 300 million times and has 15 million monthly active users around the world. Jaime shares his journey from Panama to the US to Taiwan, and also his love of building and fixing problems. We chat about how he is able to maintain the life balance with work and family. He shares what being a dad means to him and what he's done to create the best environment for his two sons. So Jaime, thank you so much for joining me today. I know your schedule is like super busy, so really appreciative that you're able to spend some time with me today.
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm very flattered.
Oh, flattered? Well, I'm sure you get invited all the time. No. Anyway, I wanted to start off about asking, because you're originally from Panama, and you're also Chinese ancestry background, right?
Yeah, so my grandparents were all four of them were born in Guangdong.
Guangdong?
Yeah,
okay.
and so like Chungsan or that area. And then separately actually my grandparents both immigrated separately to Panama back in probably like 1920, something like that.
Okay.
And then, then my grandmothers probably got brought over as basically mail order brides or,
wow.
And then they came to Panama, started businesses, and then my parents were both born in Panama. And my father it was a family of 9 children, and then my mother's family, there were 6 children. There are some stories. I guess maybe the right thing is not mail order brides. It's more that they settled down in Panama. Arranged marriage.
Yeah, that's really
And then I think I remember the story was that my grandmother had never been outside of China, but then, she got put on a boat, and, their family was, I think, relatively well off. So she was but she always tells this story about how, she went from China to San Francisco, and then San Francisco took another boat down to Panama, and she got off in Panama. And at first, Panama City at that time was also a relatively big city, maybe not as big as it was in China, but she was okay. But then after she got off the boat in Panama, because my grandfather lived in this small town, and this is like rural Panama, which, in the 1820s was even 1920s was very rural. So so then she was like, she thought she started up in the city, but then she kept transferring to smaller and smaller cars, smaller and smaller, eventually probably ended up in a horse-drawn thing.
Yeah, she'd have to ride a cow or anything, a horse.
But then, by the time they got to the small town that he was actually living in, she was a little bit like, what is this? What have I gotten myself into?
Right.
Yeah. But then, they made a life, they had children, and then, built up these businesses. And then Panama was also kind of fraught a bit of the time because they had sort of a Chinese Exclusion Act, sort of equivalent. Like they had this bad president who was, I think, kind of a Nazi, and then he made it so that the Chinese couldn't own businesses.
Oh, wow. That was during the 20s or it's a bit later? During the Nazi time. So that would be 40s, 40s and stuff?
Yeah, I forget the exact time.
Wow. I wonder if was that the time when the U.S. was doing a lot of stuff with Chinese immigrants, railroad kind of things like that?
That was I think that was a bit earlier, but I'm not really sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
see how much I know about my history. I forgot it already. But, you were mentioning that they had 9 kids. And then somebody else had 6 kids. Because I feel like families back then, it's just natural to have so many kids. Because my family, my father had 2 wives, so my mother was the second wife. But his
at the same time.
Yes, because in Chinese, it was accepted, the dama and the xiaoma.
Yes.
But he had 7 kids with his first wife, and the main wife, and then my mother, we had 8 kids.
Right.
But nowadays, people just don't have that many kids anymore.
Let alone multiple. Have that many wives either.
Yeah, that's true. Unless it depends on which culture you're from. It seems like they still allow that.
Back then, actually, even it was very common. Like when I look at, there's a Chinese community in Panama, and then when I talk to my parents about the family trees and who's related to who, it sometimes gets complicated because one common practice was that these immigrant men who came to build a business would also sometimes go back to China, and then they would have an arranged marriage, and then they would come back so they would have that wife over there, and maybe they would father a few children over here, and then they would go back to Panama, and then have a wife there too. And so they had a family in China, and then a wife in a family in Panama, and then but the opportunity was over here, not in China. So then they would eventually bring that other family, with the wife and the multiple kids, and then they would set up all these multiple families in Panama, and so that was a very common thing. My grandparents didn't do that, I think, as far as I know. But it's a little bit sad that it will be sort of a artifact of history that, I have 20 first cousins on each side.
Wow.
And I don't see them very often, but when I do, there's always this warmth, this recognition, even though they're people I see once every 3-4 years. But there's a connection, and that's something that I'm a little bit sad that my kids are not going to have. They won't have that many cousins. They'll have they have a 3 or 4.
Well, they got to be old enough to get married too, and then they have kids and stuff, and then they'll have a bigger family in their generation.
But probably not, right? I mean, most likely people will have 1 or 2 kids, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
They won't. They only have right now. Each one of them only has 3 cousins or something like that.
Yeah. Sometimes, though, if you have too many, it's just hard to keep track. And then what about the Chinese New Year events and stuff? I mean, do they all actually show up in one place, literally? I mean,
no. But, people are scattered all over the world.
Yeah, all over the world.
But actually, one good thing is recently with social media, it is a little bit easier to, I have cousin chats, and there's 50 people. And, and stuff gets organized there. And I think it's a good combination of their family, but it's also Latin American culture, and Latin American culture is very because they're all Chinese Panamanian,
right?
And Latin American culture is very sort of informal. So it's always we're going to go out for ice cream. Who wants to show up? And then show up, right?
I kind of have a problem with this because I feel like it's dealing with privacy issues, or Asian culture. I feel like they just want to show up at your door, or just say, hey, I'm just a couple of minutes away. Can I come by? And I'm like, no, I'm not ready. Make a schedule or do like that. But it's kind of the impromptu sort of thing.
I personally love that sort of thing just because I am. Those are the best kinds of serendipity, right?
My sisters will tell me, "Oh, I'm just coming back from something. Are you at home? I'll be there in 5 minutes." I'm like, okay, I've got tons of things to do. Should I say no? I'm not in town. I'm in Taipei right now, so don't come by. But
well, I feel like that's the one difference with I feel like American culture is a little bit more you ask somebody hey, let's get together for lunch, and they're like, sure, how about in March? Or this, right?
Yeah, it's
versus I think in Taiwan and in Latin America, it's more oh sure, I'm free today. Let's just go, right?
Yeah, I know a lot of people because I actually had a cross-cultural training company when I was in Shanghai, and people would ask me and say, Americans, they're just so fake, because they'll say, oh yeah, let's have dinner or let's have lunch, but then when I contact them, they're not available. Why do they say that? Why do they?
Maybe it's just a stereotype. I think.
No, I think it's just a different way of connecting. And it's a different expression.
Exactly.
Yeah, but anyway, there's cultural differences. But for you, I heard you say Chinese Panamanian.
Okay.
Panamanian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you do that rather than saying Panamanian Chinese. I mean, in terms of your identity, because I just always.
That's a good question. Well, it's the way that you'd say Chinese American.
Yeah.
Right? A Chinese American but that's also an interesting thing because. Well, so in the U.S. you have this concept of Chinese American.
Yeah, but
right?
for me,
or
sometimes
ABC,
I'll
American
say,
American
yeah,
Chinese.
sometimes I'll say I'm American Chinese, rather than
okay.
Chinese American.
I
This is, I'm thinking, is it because of how we identify ourselves more or not? Or is there's not, I mean, for example, Panama, they don't have an accepted way of saying whether you're Panamanian Chinese or Chinese Panamanian.
It depends on the context. So actually, that is one interesting thing because, I was in Panama until I went away to college. Mm-hmm. So in Panama, I always thought of myself as Chinese, like you're just Chino. You're not. This concept of Chinese Panamanian didn't exist. Like I always grew up in Panama, even though I'm third generation, and my parents were born in Panama. I only spoke Spanish, and learned a little bit of English little by little. I always thought of myself as Chinese growing up in Panama because, maybe this is before, all these politics of cultural identity and so forth. So, in Panama, people would just call me, "Hey, Chino," like that's just, that was just who you were. Like you were, you're not, I wasn't a hyphen, right? It was more, you're Chinese, even though I've never been there. It's just, I think also Panamanians are also more relaxed but also more explicit about race and ethnicity. Because they're, like if you're white, it's one kind of Panamanian, and if you're sort of brown, you're one kind of Panamanian, and if you're black, like and also it was a different time. I'm not sure. I haven't quite sussed out the way it is now. But so I grew up, thinking I'm Chinese.
Right.
Until I then went to college in the U.S. And then got introduced to this concept of Chinese American, Chinese Panamanians, and then sort of
interesting.
What that sort of means, and the fact that I'm actually this weird. Like I'm not Chinese, because then I met actual Chinese people and I'm like, I don't really.
Yeah, you're not like.
I have nothing in common with you. Like, well, not a lot. Like I don't have these, other than like family attitudes and sort of thing. And then I met so basically, when I went to college, most of my friends ended up being either, at first they were just mostly Chinese Americans, because that's what I was sort of used to. Yeah, that's how I sort of saw myself, and then that's the people I seeked out, and then I broadened up a little bit more. But yes, the identity depends on the context. And now I'm here in Taiwan, and well, what exactly am I? Am I Latin American? I'm definitely not Taiwanese. I'm not Chinese, really.
Yeah.
And so it's just.
You're a mixed up kid. No.
Yeah, very mixed up. Yeah. And
no, I mean.
And if I were to ask my kids, I mean, my kids have like 3 passports, and what are they? They now live in Panama. They have Latin American names. They can speak Spanish, but they also speak Chinese. They grew up in Taiwan. But they're very westernized. So like.
Yeah. So 3 passports are Panamanian, Taiwanese passport.
Yeah.
And do they have American passport?
And at some point they had a Hong Kong passport.
A Hong Kong passport also. Oh, okay.
But we're working on more passports, trying to get opportunities.
You really want them to be multicultural.
Yeah, I grew up, always conscious of, what that passports and residences open up opportunities for you, right? Like it was even though we were financially probably okay, it was always like, we got to figure out a way to get a U.S. green card. You got to figure out a way to immigrate to the U.S. somehow. And so going to the U.S. at that time, right?
Yeah, at that time,
was the dream,
right?
So that's why you went to go study there and then try to get a job and try to get a green card. Yeah. Maybe now, I don't know. It's still, something that we're sort of trying to negotiate and get.
Yeah, it's just interesting how things change too, because like, for example, I always thought, oh yeah, U.S. passport gets me so many different places,
Right.
and I would always do that. But nowadays, since I got my Taiwan passport back, depending on where I'm traveling, only about the current situation with the U.S. and what's going on in the world, I will use my Taiwan passport rather than my U.S. passport, because working abroad for so many years, you just hear people's comments about Americans, in a lot of different ways that are not necessarily always really positive, But as part of the identity thing, I'm still, actually at my age now, I think I finally have come to terms with who I am and what my identity is, because for a really, really long time, my identity was always in question. I mean, I didn't want to be Chinese ever growing up because I wasn't around any Chinese. I didn't have that. And, when I would be in school, my parents would show up for teacher conferences. They're like, those are your parents? I'm like, yeah, Landon. Yeah, those are my parents. So, and then I have, 2 Caucasian brothers, and actually my real brother, younger brother, was also adopted with me. I feel like now, in terms of identity, it was all mixed up before, and now I've kind of settled into the fact that now I live in Taiwan again. I'm embracing both parts of my culture, whereas I didn't before. So I really like to say that one of my friends kind of opened up my eyes, or opened up my heart in a way, when she told me, I always thought I was half-half. Now, which half? I'm half American, half Asian. It's just, and then she told me one time, Sharon, you're 100% American, you're 100% Chinese or Taiwanese. So you're actually a 200% person. And that's really cool,
Yeah. How did you end up back in Asia? Because it doesn't sound like that would have been a given. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so originally I was born in Taiwan. And then when we were living in Maryland, and we were about to move to Hawaii. My dad got stationed in Hawaii. We had packed all our stuff, furniture ready to go. And then next thing I know is that my mom and dad told me, oh, yeah, your brother-in-law from Taiwan is coming to see us. And I was like, what? Because I had no idea that we were in contact. I had no idea that they were still in contact with my family here.
Your biological parents?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
But I found out that during that time, Taiwan had opened up, and people that were business people could go out of Taiwan, and they could go to business. So he was on his way to Washington, D.C. For business. And he couldn't even stay at our house because we didn't have any place for him to stay. My brother-in-law. So it's my second sister's husband.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Biological sister.
Biological sister. So in Taiwan, I still had, when my brother and I left, I still had 6 brothers and sisters. And then my father was also still alive. My mom had passed away. And that's one of the reasons why I was adopted. So I found out that my brother-in-law was coming through, and I met him, and he kind of talked a little about the family. We were on our way to Hawaii, and when we went to Hawaii, moved to Hawaii, after we settled in like a month or so, was the first time that I came back to Taiwan to connect with my Taiwan family again. But that wasn't really a connection I felt, because at that time I was so American. I was still denying that I was anything other than American. I didn't speak any Chinese. I did not speak any Chinese.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So then you came back, and then...
Well, through that, I came back and then went back, stayed for 2 weeks. My brother and I went back to the States, and then for 8 years passed, and I never really had that much connection with my family.
Right.
And then I started working overseas. and I started working in China.
Oh,
And,
okay.
yeah.
That's how you ended up back here.
Yeah, it was kind of a long process. I got to know my sister used to take tours back to China.
Okay.
And if I had time from work, I'd go with them on a tour. And then
Okay.
because it was closer to Taiwan, I would come back every so often for Chinese New Year, So it was slowly connecting with them again. But, I didn't decide to move back until, 10 years ago. We met, you said about 9 years ago. And that was in acting, which is interesting because, you're a businessman. You're not really in acting, but why did you take a class? Was it for personal?
Well, I was always kind of curious about it. And I think at the time, I had also just sort of separated from my wife, and I was just sort of going to try out new things. And I think, to be honest, as I remember, there was, there was a girl I liked that she told me about this class she was taking, and I was like, oh, I could try this out. This sounds kind of interesting. And then I followed her one day I went with her to the class, and I found out that I really, I'm not good at it, but I actually quite enjoy the experience of that disconnection of turning into somebody else temporarily.
It was fun. So now it's like the secret comes out. It's the guy thing. You follow whatever. If you're interested in somebody, that's how you.
My ex-wife is Taiwanese.
Oh, okay. So, but did you meet her in Panama, or you met in the States, or?
I met her in Asia. I was here for work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I met her in Hong Kong.
Oh.
And in my life, I moved from Panama to the U.S. and then stayed in the U.S. for a while and then moved out here. It's like, yeah, you sort of need a little bit of an excuse. Same as you, right? You need a bit of an excuse to come out, but I think also it's great that life kind of just. I never thought of myself, even though I was Chino in Panama, I never thought of myself as would end up actually living in Asia. To me, that was just so. I always thought I would end up in the U.S. or something like that. And now I actually, in a sense, almost prefer life out here than life in the United States.
Yeah, who knows where life brings you? But
exactly. Yeah. You have to be open to
for experiences. You mentioned when you were in Panama, you were called Chino. People would call you Chino. In that way, it wasn't any kind of derogatory thing, because in the States, if you say chink, or it sounds like Chino, it's not very nice way of saying. So was that didn't have any kind of negative connotation in that way in Panama?
It depends how you say it. Sometimes it can be like this affectionate thing, and that's how Panamanian culture is. Panamanian culture is very sort of informal.
Right.
So it was okay.
Like a nickname or a nick.
Huh? What?
Nickname or a nick.
Yeah. It was sort of. There was still a little bit of that, but it depends how you say it. Like I remember. When I was in high school, I had this friend that I went to go visit, and my dad came to pick me up, and then my friend's brother came over, and he started saying, "Hey Chino, come do this. Hey Chino, come do that." And my dad was a little bit, wait, why is he talking that way? He was like, wait, what's going on? Why is he talking to you that way? But it actually turned out that he was talking to his brother, because my friend, even though he was sort of like this white Panamanian, he happened to have a little bit smaller eyes. And so his whole nickname, his entire life, is Chino.
Oh, okay.
Even though he wasn't actually Asian.
Yeah.
And he was actually talking to his brother. But my dad got confused. He was like, wait, why is he calling you Chino? So it's like, because the culture is a bit more informal. So you could call a white person Chino his whole life, and that's his nickname. But then I suppose that identity of thinking. So I grew up basically because my parents, they spent their social life was sort of built around, even though they were also born in Panama, their social life was sort of built around relatives and like some of these Chinese associations. And so in all the events and all the, birthday parties and like Christmas parties, I was always surrounded by Asian Chinese Panamanians who I thought were other Chinese. And then, I had some friends who were Panamanian, but actually most of my friends were. So I sort of always grew up conscious of the identity.
Right.
But I didn't also realize that it is actually so different from actually being Chinese, like from mainland China or Taiwan.
Right.
So it's interesting, is you're just stuck in between.
Yeah, it's really important, what your perceptions are depending on where you're born, your culture, what age you are when you go into other places. But like for your parents then, your parents were Chinese. Were they like typical Chinese where you had really had to focus on studying and getting those grades and getting the degree, going to the go to the States to get a better education so you can be better off?
Yeah, they worked really hard they thought education was very important, so they worked really hard to. They weren't business owners. They just worked they actually both worked for the Panama Canal as employees, but they saved up money because they believed education was very important. So all four of us, me and my siblings, we all studied in the U.S. because they believed that was the best education. So that's how they set out. But they weren't like target parents. They were firm that you have to do well. But somehow we all turned out well. That we all got graduate degrees eventually.
Yeah. So I feel like it's because they're in the environment. You said in Panama, it's Latin. Type of culture there. It's more relaxed and everything like that. So maybe that had a lot to do. They weren't entrenched in the Chinese culture where such and such things were.
It's a good mixture of both. I think that they that's why I sort of love that sort of mix of you have sort of this seriousness and responsibility and dedication of that comes with the Asian background, but it's also sort of a bit more the informality and the warmth of Latin American culture.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of wanted my kids to experience that too. And so, my children were born here in Taiwan, but earlier this year we actually moved them to Panama to go to finish their high school there.
Wow. You said that they speak Spanish, they speak Mandarin.
Yeah,
they
they were born here, but I had read that it's good to raise kids with as many languages as possible.
Yeah.
So for the first years of their life, I only spoke to them in Spanish, and their mom only spoke to them in Chinese, and so it was this household, and like I still don't fully speak Chinese, and she didn't speak any Spanish. But it was like this household where I would say something to my son in Spanish, and then he would repeat that in Chinese to his mom.
Yeah.
And then it would kind of go back and forth. And then I was told, and it was actually true, that kids who grew up that way actually learn to speak later than monolingual kids. Because it's a little bit harder for the brain but when they do, they'll do it a little bit later. So some people get scared. They're like, oh my God, I'm ruining my kid because he's not talking because I'm confusing him.
Right, but if you think about it, for them to be able to just translate in their head and speak in the other language, I feel like that is so cool.
It is, but it is harder, but apparently I think they've shown studies that it actually makes their brain, it raises their IQ beyond just knowing the languages a little bit higher, because apparently early on they have to then basically learn to distinguish the cues and what language is what language. And it was interesting because even from when he was maybe 1.5 years old, my son could translate. But he didn't really, I think, fully understand the concept of languages. He just knows that this is mom's language. This is how I talk to mom. This is how I talk to dad.
Right.
And just basically automatically switch between the two. And he would only mix them when, when he didn't know exactly the word. But kids are very, very good at, like, their brains are so plastic that they can, like, kids you kids, you only mention a word to them once. I was really shocked because they would talk to me in Spanish and then realize, wait, where did you even learn that word? And he could only have learned it from me because I was the only person that could speak to him in Spanish. But like, I must have mentioned that word once because it was like such a rare word. But like, he just threw it back at me. Yeah.
So when did you guys introduce English into their life? I mean,
that just kind of sneaked in, because then they start going to like kindergarten and then they started learning English. And then we had a helper who spoke English. Unfortunately, once they switched to English, then they just like, oh, English. Everybody here speaks English. I'm just going to speak English. And so unfortunately, I wasn't. In retrospect, I should have just stuck to the Spanish, but they would speak to me in English, and I would respond back to them in English.
You couldn't do the switch. They speak to you in English, right? And then you respond back to them in Spanish.
I should have tried that, and apparently that's successful in some people. But, already kids don't listen to you all the time. So, trying to, like, push a language. But like, for example, like, my sister-in-law is very firm about that. Like, her kids grew up in California, but she only speaks to them in Spanish, and if they tried speaking to her in English, she was like, no, I switch back to it, and they're a lot more fluent than my kids. My kids now, because they moved back to Panama, now are fluent again, but it took a little while.
Yeah. I mean, like, if I actually bothered to really learn Chinese when I was in the States. My Chinese would be much better, but
I wish I learned.
Though
my Chinese is still very bad.
But I feel like for your sons too, the fact that they can speak Mandarin, I mean, just because of the way the world is, being able to speak Chinese is really valuable in terms of what they're going to do in the future.
Well, they have the top three in the world. The top three languages in the world are Spanish, English, and Chinese.
Yeah, that's true.
There was this funny story there. One of the first times I took my kids back to Panama to visit their grandparents, we were, I think we were like a year and a half old. We went on I took him to the park, and then we were walking down the park, and then at one point my this other kids kind of run through our group, and he's like, Dad, oh my God, those kids, they can speak Spanish too. And this is in Panama. Because he hadn't realized that this was another language. He just thought this was like our secret language.
Right.
And then he was shocked that these other, like everybody there in that country, actually it was like early, we just landed. So he didn't realize that like this is a whole other language. He just thought like this is our secret.
Right. Because he was surrounded by just, Chinese or English.
Chinese people. Yeah.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
It's just a perception way.
I mean, that was also like one of the first time I came to Asia for work, there was this sort of like, I never thought about it, like there was this weird shock of like, oh my God, everybody looks like me. Because I was taught growing up as a minority of, you just grew up to that, you kind of recognize Asian people and you pick them out because that's who you are, or how you're taught who you are. And then, but you're still a minority, right? Even in the US, right? Like but now it's like everybody's like that, and it was this weird, like cognitive, like, right? I mean, did that happen to you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, because mostly when I lived in Hawaii, there was a lot of Asians. But when people look at me, I've been asked if I'm Filipino, Malaysian, Singaporean, Korean, Chinese. Your sons are back are in Panama now. What do you feel like is a most important thing of being a dad, in terms of your relationship with your kids and bringing them up? And you're a single dad now, right? Or you're married again?
No, I'm still thinking that. Yeah.
Oh, but they have their mom, but that's a different thing. Yeah.
And she spends time in Panama too.
Okay, so she goes back to Panama, but she lives here. Oh, okay.
But she lives here most of the time. But also we're co-parenting.
Right.
Like I've always sort of had this great relationship with my dad. It's still very close. I always felt that I actually very much remember a time when I was sort of very socially awkward and didn't have any friends. And
that's weird because you're so, gregarious, you're so open and you're so friendly and talkative.
Well, and it's because of my dad. Like he was busy, he was building his own career, but he, at the time, I feel like I wish I could be this kind of dad, try to be this kind of dad to my own kids, is that he saw me and he's like, oh, well, I think he's having a hard time. Like I was awkward. I didn't know how to talk to people. So he actually actively did all these things to try to get me to come out of my shell. And so he sort of forced me to join this club activity in the Chinese thing. And he would sit me down and say, look, okay, this is how you talk to people. Okay. This is how I saw you interacting with this person, try saying this next time. And it actually changed my life. And so I think you have to, as a father, the father that I am trying to be is every kid is different. You see what they're, what they're like and what they're, and try to support them and see, see how they can, help them become better versions of themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are your sons quite different in terms of their personalities?
Yeah, they're very different. That's also one I find is really interesting. It's almost like in software engineering, we talk about A/B testing. Mm-hmm. You change some conditions and you see the outcome and you try the outcome over here. But I have two sons and they're very, very different. And I don't think I really did anything particularly different in the way I treated them, but they just, it's genes or it's something. They just grew up. And they're both wonderful kids. Mm-hmm. One of them is currently a bit more gregarious and outgoing, and the other one's a little bit more shy. Mm-hmm. One of them, maybe is adjusting to Panama a little bit more. The other one is still trying to find his own place and his own interests.
Are either one of them interested in, tech or engineering?
One of them is. One of them I feel like I, somehow, inculcated the whole love of engineering and building things. The other one is, I think, maybe more into, learning business. I think maybe, I'm not entirely sure. He's still young. He's still in 8th grade. But one of them is almost probably, very much into wants to build rocket ships and thinking about college now already. Yeah.
I was watching something. I think it was a video on your Facebook thing. It was one of the parties at you guys' office. Uh-huh. And there's this drone that comes flying in, it actually goes into the building and into your office. Uh-huh. And there's just so many people there. That was really cool. Is it something that you guys had? I didn't know drones could just fly into buildings and do that.
It's a friend of mine who's a cameraographer.
Oh, so he just knew how to manipulate really well.
He's a very good photographer. He gets hired to do events, and he was kind enough to bring his drone and was just flying it around.
Because I feel like your kids, based on your work and your company and stuff, must have grown up a lot with a lot of really cool, fun, interesting
gadgets.
Things.
And I've always liked Legos and things to build things and tinkering. And my whole family is actually, it may be in the genes or something, because my whole family, my mother was computer science, did computers. My dad is a civil engineer, and all 4 of us kids we have 3 engineers and an architect.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said you went to school in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And that was already with an interest in engineering. That was stuff that you studied from high school, junior high school, and
I was sort of lucky early on, because my mom had studied math or something like that, and she taught at university, but at some point she switched, maybe in the 60s, to basically work on computer mainframes, because that was one of the best jobs you could get in Panama at the time. Yeah. So she she helped maintain the computer mainframes that ran the Panama Canal. And so early on, she bought a computer, one of the very early IBM PCs. And as I remember, like she kind of bought it and said, oh, she bought a book that was like how to program the computer. And she said, you know, here, try this. And I don't know.
You didn't know anything about it at the time?
No, nothing. I mean, nobody had computers. I mean, the computers were this. Nobody had a computer at home, right? It was you had a TV and we had a video game.
Oh, those are the days.
Yeah, exactly.
Think about
right?
It. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, but you know, she gave me this book, and I kind of just read the book on my own. She didn't, and then I just became really fascinated with this, and so I started to. Like I wanted to, I like video games, but I couldn't buy them. So I started to kind of build my own video games. It was just because I was bored. And, you know, at the time, there wasn't even that much TV to watch. So there was really not that many things because it's Panama. So there was no cable TV. There was just, everything on TV was soap operas, you know, because it's Latin America. And so there was nothing for me to watch. So I would just build my own video games. And so that's how I got into computers and things like that. And so that's why when it came time to go to university, then it said it seems like this is a career. But at the time, I also thought, I want to learn harder stuff. So I studied hardware. So I studied electrical engineering because I thought it was cooler to build the computers.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you're doing games, but then you thought building them was
I thought it was
even better.
I thought it seemed like a more serious kind of thing to actually study hardware engineering. So that's why I studied electrical engineering and computer engineering. But then, interestingly, also, there was always sort of also this, even though there were engineers, there was always this kind of in my family, there's always been sort of this creative sort of aspect of it too. So, I like to design the visual aspect of the video games. And so, my brother studied engineering, but he eventually now is a professional cartoonist and TV show runner. So our family always had this sort of creative streak. And so at some point when I started working, I decided that I can be more creative. Software you can be more creative, you can be more flexible, you can build things out of nothing and create experiences and create visual constructs that you can't do with hardware. So I sort of switched to doing that just because it feels more satisfying to me to build something that people can is new and people can see and touch.
Yeah. My brain doesn't function on that side very well.
Right. Yeah.
But
you are. I mean, acting is a form of creation.
Oh yeah, creative wise, I'm talking about technology kind of stuff like that. It's a little bit over my head a lot of times. Yeah. But so then you ended up going to the States to study. How old were you when you moved to the States?
I went to college when I was 16.
16?
Yeah.
Oh, was your IQ way up there?
No, they put me in school early, and the school I went to in Panama happened to only go to 11th grade. They concentrated it for some reason, and then so I ended up going to college 2 years earlier.
Oh, I didn't know college is accepted based on age-wise. That's interesting.
Yeah, as long as you're certified. Yeah.
Okay,
so then I went straight to grad school after undergrad, and then happened to go to the right university where I was sort of in the middle of the internet boom. This is in the early 90s.
Wow.
So I ended up in Silicon Valley.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Did you end up there? Yeah.
Yeah. And then so I worked for networking companies, and one of my first jobs was a company called Silicon Graphics, who did all the computer graphics for they kicked off the whole sort of computer graphics revolution. But I mean, I was just an intern there. But that sort of got me thinking, because I saw these people that I had gone to school with, and they're they're becoming millionaires. That was the first big internet boom in the late 90s, right? And so I was like, I want to do that. That seems kind of cool. And that act of creation, of creating something new.
Right.
Yeah. So then, that's what, but I worked for other companies before, and then startups, and then eventually that's what led to, wanting to create start our own company.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the thing that made you finally jump and say, hey, I don't have a choice. I'm going to do it?
Well, it was always, I think there is this sort of like, I noticed that there is a sort of like instinct of like, oh, this is not quite right. I think this could be better. Like say you use a website or you play a game and you're like, this is okay, but like I would improve it this way. So I think that sort of comes to like engineer's mind. And so I worked for a few companies and yeah, no, it just happened to be that luckily I was, thanks to my wife at that moment, I was sort of financially, we were in a good place that I could not work actively for somebody else and get a salary. And she gave me the opportunity to basically take this in and actually just try building something. And then I also reconnected with a friend from college. Who was also, I had worked with him in one of the other, somebody else's startup, and then he was available. And then, we just threw around a few ideas and, well, let's try building this, try building that. And what eventually became PicCollage, what didn't come until much later, basically, we started the company building, at the time, something called Facebook games.
Facebook games. Okay.
Yeah, it was a Facebook API, and early on.
Oh, was it those little annoying things that would pop up that said there's games and stuff, and you're supposed to click on it, and it'll just.
But it initially didn't start intended for games. It was intended to be that you could build social utilities, and we saw, it's still a great idea. Unfortunately, it gets co-opted by spam and games. But the idea that you could take the social connections of people and build interesting utilities. Like imagine, for example, right? Like, in fact, the first thing that we tried to build was something where, okay, Facebook is the Facebook graph and the connections with your friends, but then you could build payment systems out of that.
Oh.
Right? And that still doesn't really exist, right? Like when you sign up for Venmo or PayPal, you have to kind of feed it the email addresses and the contact numbers, and it doesn't, you have to rebuild your social network. Tell her who your friends are.
Right. So you mean you're doing a system where your group of friends could
on
do
top
the
of
same.
Facebook. So that was the initial idea. So Facebook initially, at the time, they had this vision, which is still, I think, a great vision of, we have the social graph, the connection, basically knowing who your friends are.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can build all sorts of things in it, like on top of that. Like you could build event planning things, and you could build, unfortunately, 14, 15 years later, we're still not there, right? Like if you were to plan your wedding, you still have to go get your friends' emails and WhatsApp, and some of them you communicate on Instagram and all these things. And so this still doesn't exist.
But you can message your friends who you're connected to using this app, and they'd automatically get included in this wedding invitation or something.
But for example, I mean, right now it's very fragmented. Some friends I talk to through WhatsApp, some friends I talk to through Instagram, some friends I talk through Facebook Messenger.
Yeah,
some
that's
friends
true.
I talk through Apple Text, right? It's just all over the place, right? It's not in one place. And Facebook is probably the closest thing we have to that, but they don't allow you to build anything on top of that. But at the time, they did. And so that was actually our initial business. But unfortunately, what happened is Facebook eventually, I don't know if you remember, like all those Facebook games just became very spammy, just became these very frivolous things.
Yeah.
And so Facebook shut that down. And so our philosophy has always been one of, well, try lots of things and see what sticks or see what works. And so we tried lots of different things. And we were still making money from the Facebook things, but we knew that it wasn't going to last long. So we just tried lots of different things, and we tried lots of different apps and just things that work. One of the experiments was, because they had just launched the iPad, well, what if instead of learning Photoshop, and Photoshop is very complicated.
Oh, I know, it's so hard.
And I have always been too lazy I like photos, I like drawing, I like things, but I've always been too lazy to learn Photoshop. And so one of the experiments was just make it really easy thing to basically put together photos. Because although my kids were young and I wanted to put like photos of the two of them or like
Right.
earlier and before, and then, but it was one of many, many, many things that we tried. And it happened to be that the one that became PicCollage there was a need for that.
Right, right.
Like we happened to stumble upon it. And we didn't think it was going to be a big deal. We just launched like 4 things that week. And then that one somehow got a lot of users right away because there was this, even though it did nothing, it was just a simple prototype. You couldn't even save the collages. You had to screen capture them. It happened to fill a niche or a hole, a necessity that needed it. And then okay, well then this seems to get a lot of users right away. Let's kind of invest more in it and then keep developing it.
Oh, interesting.
And that's what became PicCollage.
So PicCollage has been around for how long now?
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
Wow, 14 years already.
14 years, yeah.
And so you guys are continuously improving.
I think there's a sort of thought that like the best engineers are the lazy ones. It's the ones who like you look for ways of making things easier for yourself and for other people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so it was because, yes, you just want to put 2 photos next to each other. Why should you learn about Photoshop layers and opacity and keyboard shortcuts? And we just want to just put the 2 pictures together. So that's the idea.
Yeah.
And so we've always paid a lot of attention to making it easy to use. You make it intuitive. And then, like having that sort of feel like you're touching the photos and making it like you're just natural.
Okay, I haven't tried that part. But the thing is that you guys have had it for 14 years, and tech and software, they change so often. So what kind of things have you guys done to improve? Because there's a lot of competition and stuff
there
out
is,
there too.
And so we're always trying out new things. So PicCollage has evolved over the years. Initially, it was just about having something that lots of people use, so it was always free. It still is actually free. But we've found, for example, then because we've built a company around it, we've had to figure out different strategies for making money out of it. So we tried, selling stickers and advertising, and now we sell like this sort of premium service where you get more features.
Yeah.
And that's the current way. And who knows what it will be in the future. You also have to evolve with the times, and PicCollage does a lot of video now too, because that's what people don't just do photos; they do videos and stories and reels and that sort of thing. But now, actually, about a third of the company is just dedicated to what we call our Explore team. That's just basically all we do is try out new apps and try new ideas and try new technologies to see, try to find the next big thing or something that can grow alongside PicCollage.
You mean when you say that, you mean they try a lot of different apps that are on the market, or they actually create their own thing?
No, we create a lot of
create your own
So we launch
things.
like new apps every few weeks, and just build things. And some of them work, some of them work partially, some of them don't work. But you just keep trying, right? It's sort of like this, and you learn every time. You write down the lessons that you learn every time you launch something, and what you learn about the market and about the technologies. And now a lot of that is what we see is obviously AI and how that's going to change everything. So we're investing quite heavily in that to try to find the next how the world is going to change again because of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just interesting on the AI thing, because that's another thing that I just always had heard about for the last couple of years and things, and just didn't really pay attention. And then I started hearing that, there's a lot of things that you can do with AI. So I tentatively, it's a new thing. I'm an old Asian lady, but to just force myself to actually try it, and then it's just so interesting what it can do. Just by putting in a little bit information here and there, and so I'm just thinking, in terms of your product and using AI, wow, that can open up, like you said, just so many different things. But one thing I was just wonder is how would you use AI? Is like to create an app or create several apps, but people still have to put in information.
Well, so AI is, you can think about it as sort of this transformative technology, the way that, say, the internet. I've been around long enough that there's these shifts in technology that happen. We went from not having an internet to basically using the internet for everything. We went from using computers only on our desks to now mobile phones. And so each one of these was this shift that basically changed everything. It allowed new businesses. It made old businesses die. And so AI is another one of this. It's maybe the third big one in my career. So what that means is, at first, it's just basically, okay, these are tools that we use to build new apps or new services. But actually, it becomes this whole transformative thing. It's like, it's shocking to me how quickly, for example, using ChatGPT has been adopted by the general. It's basically mainstream. Like nobody doesn't use ChatGPT to do anything, right? Like a friend was telling me that, basically they just use it as therapy. They just tell ChatGPT,
But in your circles, though,
no,
right?
this is like a non-technologist who uses it. People use it to just, instead of Google, right? You just ask it something.
Okay,
right?
I guess.
But even beyond that, for example, we are in the app businesses. We publish apps. I actually don't think that, 3 or 2 years from now, we won't be using apps to do things.
Right.
Apps is just this transitory technology. Think about, what do you use an app for? It's like you use an app to message people, right? So you use WhatsApp. And if I want an app to book a plane ticket, I'll launch the Expedia app. But I have to think about it, right? I have to think, I need to launch this app to do this. I need to use an app to find my phone. I need to use an app to book a car, right? To use Uber. But in reality, you have to launch this thing and push a few buttons. But in reality, what you want is to just be able to say, I want a car to go back to the office. And so how we use computers and how we use technology and the internet, because these newer AI things allow us to basically become even lazier. Right? You don't.
That's good in some ways.
In some ways, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't have to learn how to use the Uber app to get a car. I should just be able to tell it, I need a car to get to this place at 8:30 or within the next 5 minutes, and I should just be able to tell that to the phone or my glasses or something when I'm using it, and it should just do it, right? I don't need to, it should just work automatically.
Is it kind of like Siri sort of
it is,
concept?
Because that was sort of the idea, but now Siri didn't work so well because it didn't understand that many things. It didn't understand context. It didn't understand the language. But we're beyond that now, right? Now there's these chat bots and LLMs and large language models can understand this to the point where, yes, it will be like Iron Man. Iron Man doesn't launch the rocket app and then launch rockets, right? He just says, shoot the thing, right? And so, our business is going to change, right? Like, you won't launch the PicCollage app. You just say, I just want put these two photos together. Oh. And it will say, well, here's the two photos together, or maybe would you like to use this person's service to book that plane
I like
ticket?
that.
Yeah, it'll be a lot easier to use. And we're already basically almost there.
Wow.
And so how that changes business, it is true that as a company that, we're used to selling apps and use services. What does that mean for the future of our business? I'm not really sure. But, the other thing that you learn through going through all these technological shifts is that these shifts will happen whether you ride along with that wave or get left behind. They'll happen anyway. Yeah. So,
Might as well ride. Might as well ride that wave.
Well, hopefully, and have it take you places, or not, yes. So it's like the wave is already there, so you need to adapt yourself and what you're building in order to be able to be successful or thrive, or at least be able to keep up.
Yeah, so I was just thinking too that you say you guys are creating a lot of things and, with the AI stuff. So what happens, I mean, it's like when somebody creates something and they have a proprietary, they own that. But what if, AI comes in and then somebody else in another company does something similar and happens to be something that's kind of like similar, just a little bit different. How does that work?
That's the other question, right? In this future world, what is a company, right? Like what is yeah, well, I mean, you always have this problem that other companies can do what you do, so you assume that there's a tendency when you start off being an entrepreneur is I have this brilliant idea, but I can't tell you about it because it's like this brilliant idea that's secret. You learn that actually that doesn't mean anything. Everybody has the same ideas. There's no magic insight. What you really do is you have this notion, and then you build something, and then the successful people are the ones who see that what they've built and how people receive it, and then adjust it a little bit more, and then they see what people do with that, and then they adjust it more until you get to something that you built something that people want. And that didn't have, and so they want yours, and hopefully you're far ahead enough of other people who are also building things that you're able to basically make a temporary success. That's all you can do.
Right.
Yeah, there's no magic ideas, there's no magic solution, it's just how well you build things and how well you execute on those ideas.
So, I mean, to me, it sounds like you're just really excited and passionate about this thing with AI and what the possibilities are for the future for your company. It's not through PicCollage because you have another overall company.
It's not PicCollage.
Oh, so it's part of PicCollage. Did you have like a company that's above PicCollage or is part of
well, no, we call the whole thing PicCollage.
Oh, okay.
The company's actually called something else. It's called Cardinal Blue, but PicCollage is our main product.
Right.
But we also we try to do both. We try to research all these new things and then figure out how these technologies can be used for PicCollage, or it can be used for something entirely new. So we don't try to limit ourselves to we only do photos and videos.
Right.
We try to also keep ourselves open while still being cognizant that PicCollage is still a successful app and it has a lot of users that we're want to keep in that market, but also you have to be you don't want to be also a company that is sort of stuck in the past because you have an existing product. So that's the balance that you have to do. You have to plan for the future and you have to get ready for the future while still having a link to what's currently working.
So you have a successful company now, obviously, but what do you feel like is the most important thing in a company and a team to make it successful? I mean, is there one or two things that are really important and really relevant for that to happen?
So the what is a company? A company is just people.
Yeah.
It's people, and so we are very much I have been very fortunate to be working with a great team, and we're always, as you build a company, pay a lot of attention to the people that we hire, and also whether they're in doing so, when you're hiring people, is you're also creating a culture. And so we have this culture in our company of innovation, of asking questions and basically just build things and do things. And we have this idea that what you really want to be hiring is you want people who do what you're told. You want people. We hire builders, people who are see the world and not just say, oh, this works this way. It's more that, oh, this works this way, but it could work better. What can I build to make that better? To create things that don't exist anymore, but that are needed. And so that's the sort of when we build our team out, that's the kind of mindset and culture that we try to foster with the company. And so that's sort of, I think, the most important thing, I think, to build the company that can adapt and adjust to these waves of technology and change that happen all the time in our business.
So you've had you had a co-founder, right? That
Yes,
that you knew back in the States or went to work, and you guys are still collaborating, obviously. I think.
Yeah,
right?
no, he's the CEO of the company.
Oh,
yeah,
CEO. So have you guys ever had? I mean, you've known each other for a long time, but in terms of working together, have you guys ever had any conflicts or anything that was based on different thinking, or it was always smooth working? Because it's really important to find, to have a partner that you can,
I mean, there's
with.
always going to be, it's like any relationship, actually. There's always going to be differences of opinion. And I think that's a good thing. And I because of the environment, I am around a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think I've been super fortunate of working with, and we have other. There's now 4 co-founders that we consider co-founders of PicCollage,
Wow.
and we have good chemistry and good working together, but there's always going to be disagreements. And I think over the years, I think at some point, I think my brother pointed this out to me, is that I didn't think about it, but like that's also one of the most important relationships in your life, like your girlfriend or your wife, or like also your people that you're working with closely. I think you have to also maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
And you have to actively make sure that relationship is in a healthy state. That it's not just and then the other thing is that you learn over the years is, yes, you always have disagreements about what to do, but it's also, I think, the most important thing is, just as in a personal relationship, it's about trust.
Yeah.
That even if I disagree with some things, that I also trust that they will do the right thing, or that they're doing things out of good faith, and that carries you, I think, a long way. Even if you disagree with something, if you trust the other person, like, okay, I think we should be doing something else, but I think I also know that you will, do the right thing eventually for us,
right,
for the company.
Right.
And I think that's, and then you don't have to, it's like also like, you learn in a personal relationship, that you learn that you don't have to win every argument. You can have disagreements, and you can move on, and you trust the other person will eventually do the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing, really, honestly.
But it's been great. We've been working together for 20 something years, and I think he's basically built this great company in here in Taipei, and it's a Silicon Valley company, and it's great.
Yeah, so that's another thing too. So you have the company here in Taipei rather than in the U.S. I mean, was there a reason for that?
Well, it happened to be. I mean, when we started the company, we were fully remote. I was living in Hong Kong. He was living in Silicon Valley. I think it happened around like 2008. That was around that financial crisis of 2008. So things slowed down in Silicon Valley, and then we both sort of independently decided to move to Taipei. I, for personal reasons. He just wanted to kind of try living somewhere else. And then it just happened to be that, Taipei was a good place to build this company, because the costs are a little bit lower. There's less, there's good technical talent. But, it's a little bit, the costs are lower. But we've always sort of built the company and the products not with just the Taiwan market in mind, but we also wanted the global market. And so, we we're very fortunate that sort of worked, where you're building a product that works in the entire world, but you're leveraging the resources in Taiwan. And Taiwan is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise children. And we've been very fortunate.
Pretty happy about that decision.
No, very much. I'm very glad that we're in Taiwan.
Okay. So one last thing before I let you go. I always like to ask my guests to give me a wow, which means a word of wisdom. And so do you have any, about anything, whatever you feel like it, whether it's about personal, parenting, your company, startup, anything like that. Do you have something that is just itching to come out that maybe someone that's listening might help in some way?
Ooh.
Your life philosophy, whatever?
Let
Put
me
you on
think.
the spot.
Ooh. Yeah. Well, hold on. I don't. That's a bit of a shift, but okay. Let me think about this. I think the approach I take in life is to sort of like you have to kind of build your own anything like you have to build your own life, you have to build your own relationships, you have to work at it, and you have to and in doing so choose the more interesting things, choose the thing that is a little bit scary, that it has a bit more unknowns, but that's how it's sort of like you make applications interesting, and that's how you make your life interesting, and that's how you make relationships interesting. To do a little bit of like this thing that scares you and is more interesting, like take an acting class, or leave your high-paying job to just not have income and build the thing that you're itching to build. Take the interesting path. That's why I try to tell teach my kids to just don't get too comfortable, right? Like build the thing that's a little bit out there.
Yeah, take the road less traveled.
Yeah. The thing that when we're building a new thing is, it's a good idea when half the people are like, I don't think that's going to work. That's weird. Nobody's going to do that, right? Because if you have that intuition that might work, some people might do that. But if it is the obvious thing that everybody agrees is needed, then lots of people are going to be doing it. And that's not, and I learned myself, the first time somebody showed me the internet, I didn't get it. This is the early 90s. And I just thought, oh, well, just connecting and getting some data, right? And the first time somebody showed me an iPhone, I was also, there's so many smartphones out there, right? But, I've learned over the times that there's this tendency to just, take the obvious or the easy path. But if somebody's excited about something, but you're skeptical, then, be skeptical of your own skepticism. Do the weird thing.
Yeah, I just got what you were talking about. Yeah.
But you're interested in this, so even if I think initially this seems like a dumb idea, maybe there's something to it, and then even if it doesn't work, your life will be more interesting as a result.
So it's pay attention to your thoughts in terms of something that comes out that you think is, interesting, but regardless of whatever someone else says,
yes, that also, but also pay attention to what other people find interesting.
Oh,
right?
okay,
if they're excited
right.
about something and you're not, well, what if maybe they know something you don't,
right?
Or maybe they have some intuition that you don't, and so also pay attention to that.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is following your own intuition, but also listen and be curious about what other people's intuition and why are they excited about this.
Yeah.
And because that might lead to more interesting things.
Yeah.
For you. Yeah.
I like that word, be curious. Be curious is
I
love, even though I complain a lot about having to learn technology and all this other kind of stuff, it's kind of neat because after I do learn it, and I understand it a little bit, it's kind of like, wow, this is really cool. Learn something that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And,
there's a tendency to as an engineer to try to reduce things and say, oh, this is just this, right? The iPhone was really just another smartphone with a touchscreen, or the internet was just a computer network sending data around. But if they're excited about it, is to not sort of reduce it and dismiss it, but say, oh, well, what does this mean, right? What can this become? Why are you excited about it? And then try to understand why they're excited about it, right? Because it might be just something that you don't know yet or you don't realize yet.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for that.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys for coming in for another episode of Old Asian Lady. And we're going to see you next time. Bye-bye.
It's a great conversation. Bye.